Merry Christmas, everyone! I can't believe this channel is already 1 year old. I want to sincerely thank you all for your support and company along the way. Also, wish you a healthy and happy new year, and of course, many love and fortune come your way. In this episode, I've got 3 true chilling stories for you, all set on snowy nights. I hope these fitting tales will add a little extra atmosphere to your holiday season. And if you enjoy my video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Let's keep diving into this mysterious world together in the coming year. Now, grab your blanket, pour yourself some hot drink. Let's get started. This happened when I was in the 4th grade. My family lived in the countryside, and my elementary school was built on a hillside. The area was pretty desolate, with the back of the classroom overlooking the slope, and there were lots of graves up there. I remember when I first started school, the older kids told us all sorts of ghost stories about the place. One of the most famous ones was about a boy from the class 1, grade 4. One night, while he was on duty cleaning up, he suddenly collapsed on the floor, screaming his lungs out. Nobody knows exactly what he saw, but since then, he lost his mind, and he still hasn't recovered. Then there was another story about a security guard. Late one night during his shift, he heard strange noises coming from that classroom. Curious, he went to check it out. When he shined his flashlight through the window, he saw a toddler, barely 2 years old, sitting inside, crying. Freaked out, he rushed to unlock the door and wanted to get the kid out. But as soon as he stepped in, the child was gone. He was confused and turned around to leave, but then froze in place. There was a child lying on the floor by the door. It seemed to be already dead, its face a bloody, mangled mess. The poor guard was so freaked out that he let out a piercing scream, bolted home, and then fell seriously ill. The school tried to cover it up, even calling a meeting to announce that it was just a break-in and the guard had been injured by burglars. But honestly, no one believed that, not even the teachers. I am never a bold person. These stories scared me so much that I avoided that classroom as much as I could. As soon as school was out, I ran straight home. But you know what they say, what's meant to happen can be avoided. Eventually, when I reached grade 4, my class got moved to that classroom. On the first day of the new semester, we all showed up early to clean the place. I don't know if it was just psychological. As soon as I stepped inside, I felt this weird, heavy pressure. The classroom was dark and cold, even though it was early autumn. Besides, I noticed the window at the back had been bricked up, blocking the views of the graves on the hill. It made me wonder, was there something they were trying to keep out? When we started cleaning, an eerie thing happened. There was an old desk in the back corner of the room, completely isolated, like it didn't belong there. We were putting chairs upside down on top of the desk to sweep the floor, but no matter what we did, the chair wouldn't stay on that desk. It just kept sliding off. We all tried, but it was like the desk was rejecting it. In the end, we gave up and let it alone, sitting there in its lonely, dusty corner. The next day, the teacher came in to assign seats. A girl from our class, who was always one of the top students, got that desk. But after that day, everything changed for her. Her grades started to plummet, and the reason was obvious. She was always asleep. In class, during breaks, she just couldn't stay awake. The teacher scolded her so many times, but it didn't help. Then, something happened that finally explained everything. One snowy day before winter break, it was our group's turn to stay late and clean the classroom. There were 5 of us, 3 boys and 2 girls, including the sleepy girl. That afternoon, the snow was falling hard, and we were having fun playing in it while cleaning up. So by the time we finished, it was already dark. The large poplar tree in front of the classroom rustled loudly in the wind. Our classroom was the only one still lit, and the entire school felt eerily silent. At that moment, we remembered the school's eerie legends and hurriedly urged each other to head home. We 3 boys went back inside to get the 2 girls, but one of them had already left. The only one still there was a sleepy girl, sitting at her desk with her back to us. I called her name, but she didn't respond. I tried several more times, but there was still no reaction. Thinking she had dozed off again, I walked over to her. That's when I noticed She was facing the wall, murmuring softly as if she was talking to someone. The unsettling sight left us all frozen. We exchanged nervous glances before I mustered the courage to tap her on the shoulder, and she suddenly jumped up and slowly turned to face me. But the moment I saw her face, I nearly fainted on the spot. It wasn't her face at all. It was a twisted child's face. Her eye sockets were two gaping, bloody holes, staring at me with an empty, chilling gaze. I froze, too terrified to move. She didn't say or do anything, just kept staring me with those horrible eyes. I started backing away slowly, step by step, praying she wouldn't come at me. One of the other boys finally noticed something was wrong. He picked up a broom and threw it at her. It hit her right in the head, but she didn't flinch. No blood, no reaction, just that same unblinking stare. Then the boy behind me whispered, his voice trembling, "There's a kid behind her, do you see that?" Honestly, I didn't see anything, but when he said that, I suddenly felt like there was a shadowy figure standing there. That was it. I bolted, leaving my bag behind. The other two boys followed me, slipping and falling on the snowy path as we ran for our lives. Once we were outside the school, we finally stopped to catch our breath. I asked the boy, "Did you really see a kid?" "I swear I did. It was pulling on her shirt." Then he added something that still gives me chills to this day. "And when you walked into the classroom earlier, I saw a faceless kid following you." When I heard what my classmate said, I was so mad I could barely hold it in. "You saw it earlier and didn't see anything?" I shouted. After that, we all split up and rushed home. None of us dared to mention it to our parents. We didn't want to get scolded for lying. But as things turned out, it was impossible to keep it a secret. The next day at school, I saw a crowd gathered around our classroom from a distance. Curious, I got closer and found the school's principal, vice principal, and our homeroom teacher all standing inside the room, trying to bar students from entering. Like everyone else, I pressed my face against the window to see what was going on. That's when I saw the principal pull something wrapped in a cloth out of the desk in that corner. The sleepy girl's seat. It was oddly shaped, almost like a chunk of meat, and there were faint bloodstains seeping through the fabric. I couldn't shake the feeling that it looked like a baby. The principal quickly stuffed it into a burlap sack, trying to conceal it, and then motioned for us to come into the classroom for lessons. That's when I noticed the sleepy girl wasn't at school. Where was she? Was she okay? A million questions raced through my mind, but I couldn't focus on anything. When the bell finally rang, the teacher said, "Some students have family matters and can't attend today. There's no need for anyone to gossip. After school, the students on cleaning duty last night should stay behind and come to office with me." When school ended, the four of us who had been on duty went to the office, where we told the principal and our teacher everything that happened in detail. After listening quietly for a while, they dismissed it all, saying we must have imagined things. They warned us not to speak about the incident to anyone, or else we'd face expulsion. Then they tried to reassure us with some kind words before sending us home. But something as big as this couldn't be silenced just because we were told to keep quiet. About a week later, a classmate who was close friends with the sleepy girl shared what really happened afterward. It turned out that after we ran off, the girl had stayed in the classroom until late that night. Her family, very sick, came to the school to look for her. When they found her, she was still in that position. Her family was terrified and tried to call out to her, but she still didn't respond. And no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't move her, as if she were rooted to the spot. In the end, her dad had to carry her home on his back. When they got home, her family called a spiritual medium for help. The medium said she was being haunted by a spirit, a baby ghost. Thankfully, it wasn't trying to harm her, so it could be sent away with the proper rituals. Finally, the girl was back to normal, but her family refused to let her stay at our school. Word got around that the school had even paid them compensation. She transferred shortly after, and none of us ever saw her again. Since then, her old seat in the classroom was left empty. No one dared to sit there, or even at the desks nearby. Eventually, the school built a low brick wall in that corner to block it off, and after that, nothing strange happened again. At least, not until I graduated from elementary school. Oh, and about that cloth-wrapped thing the principal pulled out that day, someone later confirmed it really was the body of a dead baby. No one knows how it ended up in our classroom. Some say it was dragged there by a wild animal. Others believe someone deliberately put it there. The creepiest rumor, however, is that the baby ended up there on its own, because a villager claimed to have seen tiny footprints in the snow leading straight to our classroom door. Based on the bricked-up window, it's pretty clear that this classroom has some serious feng shui issue. It was likely caused by facing directly toward the graves on the hillside, which is why the school tried to block it off with brick walls. This kind of bad layout can attract lingering spirits and even give them the chance to turn into entities. I think that eerie baby spirit was likely one of those. I had a childhood friend named Da Peng. What I'm about to tell you today happened to him. One year, Da Peng bought himself a jeep and started taking passengers near a coal mine. Although he was new to the job, he was an excellent driver. On top of that, he had outfitted his car with plush padding. It was so comfortable that both drivers and passengers loved it. Business was booming, and his earnings steadily increased. I thought his life was finally turning around, but then, that winter, I heard that something terrible had happened to him. That winter was particularly harsh. Heavy snowfall brought transportation to a standstill. I headed home early for the Lunar New Year and didn't hear much news until I returned. When I went looking for him, he was nowhere to be found. Fellow drivers told me he'd run into some kind of trouble, quit his job, and started working at a coal washing plant. Alarmed, I rushed straight to his house. They seemed surprised to see me, and when I asked about the incident, his mother avoided the question. It wasn't until his younger sister spoke up that I learned the truth. Da Peng had encountered a ghost. She said a few nights ago, he came home acting like a madman. He kept running around the house trying to hide, muttering that someone was chasing him. At one point, he nearly set his car on fire. It was only when his uncle came over with a knife to chase away the someone that he finally calmed down. Hearing all this left me deeply unsettled. Da Peng had always been fearless, a guy who didn't flinch at anything. Whatever he had encountered must have been extremely terrifying to shake him up like this. Without wasting any more time, I said goodbye to his family and headed straight out to find Da Peng in the plant. When I arrived at the plant, I saw him sitting by the entrance, smoking a cigarette. He looked worn out, shoulders slumped. When he saw me, there was a flash of surprise in his eyes, but he didn't say a word. He walked over, patted me on the shoulder, and gave me a nudge toward my bag, signaling for me to join him for a drink. We found a small restaurant and sat down. Half a bottle in, Da Peng finally started talking. "When did you get back?" His voice sounded hoarse, like he'd just finished a rock concert. "What happened to your voice? And your car, what's going on?" He hesitated for a moment, then let out a deep sigh. "Don't even mention that car. I almost died in it." Then he began to recount what had happened. About a week ago, after a long day of work, he went home and collapsed on the bed, falling asleep instantly. Around 10 p.m., he suddenly woke up with an inexplicable sense of dread. Feeling uneasy, he lit a cigarette, put on some clothes, and headed outside. Feeling strange, his mom asked him where he was going, but he didn't respond, just kept walking. He later told me that he had heard her question but couldn't control his legs. It was as if something had taken over his body, compelling him to get in his car and drive. In a daze, he drove all the way to the foot of the mountain behind the village. That's when he saw a man in the distance running toward him, stumbling as he went. It turned out to be Mr. Ma, one of their neighbors. When Mr. Ma reached the car, he was frantic. "Help! There's been an accident at the mine." No hesitation, Da Peng let him in, and they sped toward the mine. When they got there, a group of workers was gathered around 3 injured men lying on the ground. 2 were groaning in pain, but the third lay still, breathing faintly. His face as pale as white paper, it was clear he wasn't going to make it. When the workers saw the car, they quickly loaded all 3 men inside. The 2 injured ones sat in the front, while the unconscious man was laid across the back seat. Da Peng drove as fast as he could toward the hospital. but the snow-covered roads were treacherous. Despite his urgency, he had to move carefully to avoid skidding. Halfway there, the atmosphere in the car suddenly shifted. Specifically, he suddenly felt an icy chill down his back. He cranked up the heater, and the sound of the warm air rushing out offered a bit of comfort. Strangely, though, several minutes later, the car's temperature refused to rise. Desperate, he threw on a thick coat, but it didn't help either. It felt as if there were a massive block of ice in the backseat, radiating an icy chill. Alright, let it be. He then focused on the road ahead. Finally, they arrived at the hospital. The doctor quickly took the unconscious man out of the car, but after a brief examination, he said, "This one's gone. His pupils are dilated. Take him to the morgue." After settling everything, Da Peng returned to his car, started driving home. As he drove, he couldn't help but dwell on the misfortune. His car, once spotless, was now tinted with death. How could he continue to use it to transport passengers in the future? As his mind raced, he caught a glimpse in the rearview mirror and was immediately struck with terror. There, on the back seat, was a shadowy figure. Despite the late hour and the lack of streetlights, he could clearly make out the silhouette of a human form sitting in the back. Every hair on his body stood on end. Not knowing what to do, he forced himself to keep driving, pretending not to notice anything. As he neared his home, the shadow suddenly spoke in a low, chilling voice. "It's so cold." That was a breaking point. Already on edge, Da Peng slammed on the brakes, jumped out of the car, and scrambled away as fast as he could. He ran and ran, but to his horror, no matter which way he went, he found himself circling the car. At the same time, the surroundings were pitch black, and his back felt like it was being weighed down by something heavy, as if an invisible force was pressing him into the ground. He was on the verge of tears, convinced he was going to die that night. Just as he was about to lose all hope, a voice called out from the distance. "Da Peng, what are you doing over there?" The moment he heard the voice, both the darkness and the weight on his back vanished. Without a second thought, he picked himself up and ran blindly toward the source of the voice, not even daring to look back. It turned out that the one calling him was his mother. Ever since Da Peng had inexplicably left the house earlier that night, her right eyelid twitching incessantly. In China, there's a saying, "A twitching left eyelid signals good fortune, while the right one signals misfortune." Worried, she decided to step outside and wait for him. Before long, she saw Da Peng driving back. But after getting out of the car, he started running circles around it. Finding this strange, she called out to him, and unexpectedly, that single shout seemed to snap him out of his nightmare. Once inside the house, Da Peng immediately bolted to the inner room and hid behind the door, muttering, "Help! Someone's chasing me!" His father asked him who it was, but Da Peng just pointed frantically around the room, first at the door, then at the bed. However, no one else could see anything unusual. At a loss, they decided to call in Da Peng's uncle, who was a medium. Strangely enough, the moment his uncle arrived, Da Peng stopped acting out. He stood motionless, as if frozen in place, and remained silent. His uncle approached him, examined his eyes and hands, and reassured him, "Don't be afraid, you're not going to die. Oh, I see him. Is it the pale-faced guy?" Da Peng's eyes widened. "Yes, that's him. He keeps following me. You can see him too?" "Yeah, but don't worry. The moment he saw me, he ran off. You just don't wander around at night anymore." Relieved, his father decided to park the car for him. However, as his father couldn't reverse the vehicle, he called Da Peng out to help. But the moment Da Peng opened the car door, he screamed again. Sitting in the passenger seat was the person who had been chasing him, his pale face and hollow, black eyes staring straight at him. That was it. Da Peng had had enough. In a fit of desperation, he stormed back inside, grabbed a can of engine oil, and was about to set the car on fire. Fortunately, his uncle stopped him just in time, then grabbed a kitchen knife and began wildly slashing at the air inside the car. By the time he was finished, dawn was breaking. Afterward, his uncle asked Da Peng what had happened to bring this spirit onto him. Da Peng recounted the entire series of events. Shaking his head, his uncle said, "You can't keep this car. Take it to the scrapyard and have it crushed. I did the calculation. The man died inside the car, and his spirit is trapped there. Your life energy is too weak to suppress it. If you keep driving this car, you're bound to meet disaster. After hearing about the whole story, I was so shocked that I couldn't say a word. Later, I asked him if he would go drive again. He replied earnestly, "Yeah, but I'll only drive half-body vehicles, ones without a back seat, and I only take one healthy passenger at a time." This guy, I still can't tell whether he's brave or just plain terrified. I don't know if it's the same in other countries, but in China, people are extremely cautious when buying second-hand cars. One of the biggest concerns is whether the car has been in an accident, especially a fatal one. We believe such cars are more likely to be haunted by the deceased spirit, bringing bad luck to the new owner and even leading to more accidents. I've heard stories of people buying these accident cars because they were cheaper, but only those with strong energy seem able to handle them without issues. Even so, the car often ends up getting into minor scrapes or fender benders. Eventually, the owner has no choice but to sell it again. It's like the car is cursed or something. I've been part of our province emergency rescue team for 5 years now. It's a volunteer-based organization where everyone has their day jobs, but when duty calls, we gear up under our captain's lead to support search and rescue missions. So over time, we would inevitably encounter some strange incidents. One such story, shared by our Captain Yu, took place during a snow mountain rescue mission. Back in 2000, Yu was still a passionate outdoor enthusiast. That year, he joined a group of over 20 people attempting to climb a remote peak on Mary Snow Mountain. Right before their departure, the weather forecast took a turn for the worse. But unwilling to dampen the mood, the group decided to stick to their plan. Everything went smoothly until they began the ascent. Snow mountains are always desolate, filled with steep slopes and icy cliffs, slowing their progress significantly. About halfway through the day, one of the women in the group ran out of stamina, forcing everyone to slow down. As a result, they couldn't reach the campsite before nightfall. By then, the wind had picked up, howling through the icy cliffs. The terrain became more and more treacherous, and one wrong step could mean falling to your death. Returning to base camp in the dark was out of the question. It was far too risky. So, the group decided to push forward just a little more, hoping to find a safer spot to set up camp. However, they hadn't anticipated a full-blown blizzard was on the way. Soon, snow swirled fiercely in the wind, creating a whiteout. The snow piled up quickly, and crevasses lurked beneath the surface. Exhausted and dragging an injured teammate, the group's progress slowed to a crawl. In the end, for safety, they tied themselves together with a rope. The captain led, the injured woman was in the middle, and an experienced climber stayed at the rear. But even with these precautions, disaster struck. On a section of mist, ice, and rock, the blizzard disoriented the climbers at the back. The man anchoring the group misstepped and fell into a deep crevasse, and the sudden pull on the rope caused the injured woman and the 2 others to tumble down a snowy slope. The accident happened so fast, everyone was paralyzed with fear. Below the slope was a 100-meter drop, and the 3 who fell had no chance of survival. Meanwhile, the crevasse was over 30 meters deep. Without proper gear, there was no way to pull him out, and given his likely injuries, immediate rescue seemed impossible. Amazingly, the man trapped in the crevasse was still conscious and could communicate with the team above. Holding onto that glimmer of hope, Yu decided to set up camp nearby, mark their location with signal lights, and wait for the storm to subside before seeking help. The loss of 4 teammates hit everyone hard, leaving them in low spirits. After setting up camp, no one spoke a word, and they quietly began taking turns resting and standing watch. Yu and another teammate were on duty during the second shift, but worn out from the grueling effort, both of them unknowingly drifted off to sleep. But suddenly, Yu heard a man's voice calling out faintly. It sounded like the climber who had fallen into the crevasse. He immediately dismissed the thought. The crevasse was over 500 meters away. There was no way the voice could carry so clearly. But then he heard it again. "Help me, help me, help me." The voice sounded closer this time, and it didn't seem to be coming from the crevasse. It felt like he was nearby. Driven by a mix of fear and hope, Yu grabbed his ice axe and headed toward the source of the sound. He had barely walked 100 meters when he heard another desperate, "Help me." And this time, it was coming from right beneath him. Trembling, Yu cleared the snow from the ground and revealed a layer of ice. He shined his flashlight on it and froze. Beneath the ice was a face. It was a climber who had fallen into the crevasse. His eyes were wide open, and his mouth hung agape, as if frozen mid-scream. He appeared to be staring directly at Yu, pleading for help. Terrified, Yu swung his ice axe at the ice, shattering it and leaving a gaping hole. Then he fled back to the camp, waking his teammates to recount what he had seen. As expected, no one believed him. They insisted it was impossible. The crevasse was far away and the injured climber couldn't have moved, let alone showed up beneath the ice. They chalked it up to exhaustion and hallucinations, urging Yu to rest and wait for professional rescuers. The next morning, as the storm subsided, the team rushed to the crevasse. They called out for the trapped climber but received no response. On the third day, the rescue team finally arrived and retrieved the man's body by evening. He was severely injured, and the coroner concluded he had died instantly upon falling into the crevasse. But everyone clearly remembered he had responded when he first fell. And the most chilling part is, his face had a hole in it, exactly matching the spot where Yu had struck the ice with his axe that night. To this day, no one can explain what happened. Yu continued climbing mountains after the incident, but he never again set out in uncertain weather or took unnecessary risks, especially with injured teammates. I can't help but feel like maybe that guy was actually still alive after he fell. Could it be possible that he tried climbing back up along the icy cliff, but ended up going the wrong way and couldn't find an exit, which is why you saw him on the ground? As for the autopsy results, could the freezing temperatures have affected the coroner's judgment and led to a mistaken time of death? Of course, I don't have any expertise in this area, so I'm not sure if this is even possible. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Alright, that wraps up this video. So what do you think? Did the stories give you chills in more than ways than one? In the end, wishing you all a happy Christmas night, sleep well, and good night.